Welcome to American Dreams. I'm visiting today with Dr. Stel Nikolakakis. Welcome to today's show.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited to have you here. And Stel, I guess you're in Toronto right now. And
Snowy Toronto.
So let's go through for the listeners. Tell us about your background. How did you get to where you are today?
Oh, wow. Where do we start? So I am an optometrist by profession. And I discovered a subset of optometry called Neuro-Visual Optometry after my youngest son was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. And we lost his twin. So the story kind of began there. And whenever I speak, I tell people like my life was always perfect. I was the captain of the football team. I was captain of the rugby team, valedictorian, athlete of the year, yada, yada, yada. I married a beautiful woman, perfect, great couple, like values, all these other things. And then we had an issue with baby making. So it was 3 years of infertility. So eventually, after 3 years, we finally had baby number one. So that's when Thomas was born, healthy, 9-pound, 4-ounce baby boy, full term. And then when we decided to have baby number two, we were given baby number 2 and 3. So twins were coming, and then complications, and this is where my story began. We lost Michael 5 days before they were born, and then Gabriel was born at 26 weeks, 1 day, 2 pounds. And we called the NICU home, the neonatal intensive care unit home, for the next 146 days. And 2 years after that, he got diagnosed with cerebral palsy. And then one of my colleagues and friends came to the house and saw Gabriel in a certain position and basically said, we can help him with vision therapy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We do eyeballs. So he tried to explain to me what vision therapy was, because it's big in the US. It was fairly new in Canada at the time. And anything that can help my son. I went to the States to get trained in it. It took about 2.5 years. And then I realized how we can help him, which helped immensely, but also 25% of every classroom has a vision-related learning issue that gets diagnosed a certain way. So we could help 25% minimum of the kids in every classroom, and then concussion or brain injury patients. And now the big one is high-performing anything, athletes, entrepreneurs, where we can actually use the visual system in order to support them at that level. So that's sort of one angle that hit me. Now, before that, I did some training in neuro-linguistic programming, and mainly to be able to communicate better on stage, because I taught at the university for 10 years. And I was interested in being able to, communicate a message, or I was always interested in coaching programs or public speaking programs. But anyways, I got caught up in that content. And in order to be effectively, an effective speaker, some of the emotions have to be disconnected. And fear is one of them, and anxiety. So they started putting us through processes of how to basically let go of the fears and the anxieties. And I became a better motivational speaker, public speaker. But it also made me realize how dealing with what we call emotional legacies can literally change your life. And even though I didn't pursue the coaching side of things, it was more, again, information at the time. Everything sort of came together when I realized that one of my callings is to change lives through vision and to help people discover their purpose, discover their vision. And one of the ways to do it is I share my story, and then that in turn helps other people open up their story. And I mean, it's been life-changing in so many different levels. So we could start from there.
You mentioned about your son that's cerebral palsy and leading you down this path. And then since then, you've also opened up some other venues, such as helping people with ADHD. What is the root cause of why people with ADHD struggle learning in the classroom? And exactly, how do you help them in your
process? Great question. And again, when I learned about it, I thought, wow, we can help so many kids learn to learn, basically. And I'll give you an example of what it looks like and how we support kids in the classroom, but I'm also going to explain how we could support really successful and mainly entrepreneurs that are told that they have this diagnosis. Meanwhile, it's the same kids that basically strategize their own way and are creative with it that ended up being their gift to discover, where the success came from. So just to make it simple for the listeners, the statistics are 80% of the symptoms of ADHD, okay, are the same as vision-related learning issues. Identical. Okay, so if the visual system's not evaluated, then we look at the behavior and say, oh, that child has ADD. Let's give them medications in order to calm the what we call the attention deficit, which is a bit of a misnomer. It's attention, it's over attention on things. And basically what happens when you have what we call a sympathetic response, when the brain is on a fight or flight response. And the analogy I give is, think of a lion chasing you. Okay, when a lion's chasing you, or you perceive a lion's chasing you, you don't focus on a book up here. Okay, you're focusing on the exit. How do I get out of here? In other words, the brain does not want you to converge. It doesn't want the eyes to turn in. It doesn't want you to focus here. It wants you to focus on the exit. And it also doesn't want you to be distracted by peripheral things that are there. It's constrict everything so that all you can see is the exit sign. Okay? So when we evaluate patients, we see if they have a convergence issue, and if it's remote, and their focusing is also remote, and we measure their awareness of their peripheral or what their side field, and all three of them are positive responses, we know that they have what is called a sympathetic response. Okay? Now, the way that it looks when a child reads, imagine you're looking through a little tunnel. So if I'm going to read, I only see one word at a time, and then you go to the second line underneath, but because it's a constricted space, I'm not sure where that second or third line is. So I'm going to skip lines, and I'm going to start reading. Nothing's making sense. So I have to go back and say, oh, I skipped a line. By this time, the brain just can't comprehend what it's reading because it's so busy doing other things. Okay? So one of the ways that we can support those kids is to provide lenses or filters in order to create a parasympathetic response and to open up the space neurologically for them to be able to see more space. Okay, and that in and itself calms the system down, allows them to see 2 letters at a time, and the reading starts improving already, which then opens up the floodgates for the brain to be able to understand what it is that they're reading. So that's an example of ADD. With regards to the older generation, okay, so you can imagine what happens is either the child will collapse and, somebody says something to them, you're not smart, or, right? And either they collapse, or the opposite is they act out, or they do things differently, or they discover, you don't think I'm smart? Watch what I'm going to do. And they create different strategies that the other kids don't have. Okay, now imagine if they've created strategies that the other kids don't have, and you can now go back and provide them conventional neural network openings. Now they have the new strategies and they have the more efficient system, which then allows them to then calm the brain fully and then be more creative. Another question, and I ask this all the time when I have a child that comes in with ADD. Typically, they're really, 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 really good at something, and it's either a sport or an art or something creative, dance, something, okay? And then that's how they utilize their abilities in order to express in that area. And what we do is enhance it even more and allow them to learn in such a way that they become a better athlete, they become better artists, they become better at dance or whatever it is that they're interested in. So that's the whole ADD conversation that we can start the conversation with, because I can talk about this for a week.
You, when you meet with them, you give the kids tools, or the people tools to work with, and accountability and measure, and is it like an hour meeting, or how do you, what is your process there?
So when, I'll tell you the story, what happened when I was at one of the courses. And I was there with colleagues, right? We were learning about vision therapy, and the instructor asked the question. No, the instructor explained how this one procedure that we do with the kids called column jumping works. And you can imagine it's just 5 columns of letters. And then you have the first letter of the first column and say the first letter of the third column. And you just jump between the first letter of the first column, first letter of the third column, second letter of the first column, second letter of the third column, and off you go, back and forth, back and forth. And he said, you want to allow the child to go fast enough to make at least, no more than 20% errors. Okay? And because that's where the learning occurs. So one of my colleagues puts up her hand and she goes, how do you know that you didn't get 80% correct? Now, I didn't pick up on the fact that she asked the question because it's from personal experiences, and he caught up on it. He said, come on up. And so she went up and he says, do the procedure. And this is what it sounded like. A, P, P, B, D. And I thought this was a trick chart. And at the break, I looked at the chart and I thought, what on earth? Because I could A, B, P, D. It was pretty easy. So at the break, I said to her, do you mind if I ask what was going through your mind when you're reading that chart? And she started crying. And I mean, a lot. And I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. She goes, no, it's fine. It's I actually have a label to my problem. And so then she told me that she's always had a reading issue. And I said to her, you're my hero. She goes, what do you mean? I said, this is like somebody telling me that they won the Olympics with one leg. Because in school, I mean, all we did was read and read and read, right? And then she said to me, but Stel, what you don't realize is what took you 10 minutes to do, it took me 8 hours. So I had no social life. And what it did to me emotionally, I can't even explain right now, which is what you're experiencing. Anyway, so then I walked up to the instructor, and there is a tool. It's a standardized test, takes about 2 minutes to run on kids, called the developmental eye movement test. And I said to the doc, I said, I say this with no disrespect, but you should be ashamed of yourself. And he said to me, why? And I said, are you telling me there's a standardized test that takes 2 minutes to run on kids and nobody knows about it? He goes, well, we're trying. I said, there's no trying. And he said, well, that's why we need guys like you that are loud and can share the message. So when I came back to the office, I said to my team, every child that comes in here is getting screened. So Alan, let me just tell you, 25% that they say is a low statistic. Okay, so we picked it up with the screening test. Then you do testing on them to figure out what they need. And a lot of the times we use what are called neuro-balancing lenses. Okay, not for clarity, for space. Okay, and we can provide the child a lens that allows them to have a different way of seeing, okay, or the visual process works differently so that they can understand what they're reading and their brain's not busy doing other things like trying to track and trying to focus. Okay, and we also use filters to do it too. So that's just one example.
You're in a hot area right now because, with the advancements and stuff. So, I imagine that you're getting a lot of calls and inquiries. So you're in Toronto. What if somebody can you service anyone in the world, or do you use Zoom, or how do you work?
Yeah. So the gift that COVID gave us in the office is that we basically took the vision therapy and did it. We're one of 3 offices, I think, in the world that I know of. And it took us about 2 weeks to get everything online. But I mean, there's so many people that ask me, how come I've never heard about this before? And I mean, the reason I love doing these podcasts is my promise is to get the word out there, so that a lot more parents and families know that it exists. Like I said, in the US, it's big. It's been around for a while, and I don't even know, they changed the name, but COVD, the College of Vision Development. I can't recall the new name because they just renamed it last year, but it's a huge organization that has a list of all the docs in the US that do vision therapy, or the kids can get screened. In Canada, we have Vision Therapy Canada, VTC.com. So, and they're, I mean, the two, I wouldn't say VTC is the biggest organization, but that's the North American base. And then there's a bunch in Europe as well, too. One of the dreams for me is that every eye care professional knows how to screen kids, because it starts from there, right? It becomes real, and then it allows parents to know where to go in order to get the deeper evaluation. It takes about 3 hours to run the full neurovisual evaluation so that we can see which systems are inefficient, which visual systems are inefficient. And then sometimes it's just lenses that's required or filters. Sometimes it takes therapy, vision training in order to support them. But it's an individualized program. So at the end of the 3 hours, usually there's a report, 6-7 page medical report that all the practitioners that they're working with can help that child out. But yeah, it's big, and unfortunately not enough people know about it.
If families that have children with disabilities, is there oftentimes is it hereditary, or what do you find in working with families?
Working with families is actually a passion of mine, and what I started finding when when I was doing the reports, like there's a report pickup where I always want the parents to be there, and if the child's young enough, I tell them don't bring the child because I can speak to the parents directly. And as I go through the inefficiencies in the visual system, typically there's one or both parents that can relate because they also have the same issues. And one of the things that I've learned is not just to look at the child with the disability, but how is it that we can support even the parent to be better at what they do, which then in turn supports the family as a whole. And what I didn't mention is my passion now in terms of the coaching side is to support people in terms of what their potential is and meet them where they're at, right? So you can imagine now if, as I was going through what I was going through, if somebody could support me to be a better father, to be a better leader, to be a better optometrist, to be a better friend, right? And tap into my potential. Imagine what happens to the environment at home going through something where it's not just about, oh, my poor child's going through these issues, right? And one thing I can add here is we had a meeting with the neurologist that diagnosed Gabriel's cerebral palsy 2 years after the confirmed diagnosis. 2 years after he was born to confirm the diagnosis. And it was the best meeting of any medical professional I've ever experienced. Imagine, he gave us the worst news, and it was given to us in the best possible way. So I saw him afterwards because he was a keynote speaker at a conference that my wife was speaking at as well. And I said, I'm glad that we ran into each other. I just want to say thank you for what and how you supported us with that news. And I want to compliment you in your clinical abilities to then be able to disseminate that information. And he said, I'm glad that we met because everything changed after that meeting with you. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, the longest time it was always sitting in front of me, something that you made me realize when you told me the story of your son and all the potential of what he's doing now. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I ended up doing a study with the psychology department at SickKids, and we determined and proven that the emotional state of the parents dictates the neurological development of the child. In other words, if the parents are in a positive state, okay, then the development automatically is improved in that child. Okay, and they did the study to prove it. And when I heard that, that's when I woke up and I said, hold on a second here. The whole family needs to be supported here. And now my passion on the coaching side, which helps mainly the parents, and then the passion that I have in the neurovisual side to help the kids, literally the whole family gets supported at every level.
Person on West said, inquire for more information. How would they go ahead and do that?
I mean, my office is www.mindseyeoptometry.com. So MINDS EYE optometry, OPTOMETRY.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions to direct people, and especially if they're in different states. Again, I wish I could say it used to be covd.org. I'm sure if you put covd.org, it's going to transfer to the new name of what COVD was. And then Vision Therapy Canada, VTC.com or .ca. But there's a list of docs that you can actually put in whichever province or state that you're in. And then parents can learn more about what it is that we do. So if your child's being diagnosed with ADD or has learning issues or says like dyslexia, learning difficulties, it's a huge opportunity. And just again, a story. My son had the second highest prescription I've seen in my career. He had strabismus, which is an eye turn. When I was turned in, diagnosed clinically deaf at birth, and they told us he's not going to walk, talk, see. He's going to be in diapers the rest of his life. He has no prescription now. His eyes are straight. He hears perfectly well. Sick kids doesn't understand why, but neuroplasticity is real. I mean, it's scientific. It's real. I can explain it. Not that I will now, but when you have an understanding, and the thing is, once you experience it or your child experiences, then an intangible becomes tangible. Okay, and the one thing I always tell people is get evaluated so that you can experience what it is for you and the family, because whenever there's any type of disability, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, doesn't matter, the whole family's impacted. It's not just the child. So, and I'm big on how the family gets impacted, and then also the opportunities that it provides. Because a lot of people hear my story, and the first thing they say is, "I'm sorry," and I tell them, "Please don't be. It was the best thing that happened for me, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now if that wasn't the case." So.
Well, Dr. Nikolakakis, I really appreciate you being with us here on American Roots. I appreciate all the work that you're doing and throughout the world to help make this a better place, especially people that are, with learning disabilities. It's incredible work that you're doing.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything.